it's Mr. Nobody coming at you with another book review today. So today I'm going to talk about 3 Thomas Sowell books, technically 4. 2 of them are part of the trilogy, the And Culture trilogy, Migrations and Cultures, Conquest and Cultures, and I'm also going to mention Race and Cultures, and I'm just going to talk briefly about A Conflict of Visions. So if you are just a history nerd and you're curious about the whole world, because all of the books in this trilogy very much take an international perspective, these are great books to read or to listen to, because you can listen to the audiobooks online, even just on YouTube, which is great. And they're so interesting. I think I read Race and Culture first, but I actually don't have my copy of it anymore. And it's very interesting. It's just he's just looking at the interactions of the things like migration. People move. And so it says, okay, here's all these different groups. How did migration affect them, these cultures? And also, how did it not affect them? So if you have one people group, let's say Germans, and they go into 10 different countries, 10 different parts of the world, radically different circumstances. In what ways did they bring who they were with them and do something really distinct there and go there? It's like, okay, here's the Germans. What do they like in Germany? They like beer. So they went to China. Well, where did the beer industry, which is pretty big in China, come from? Well, it was started by Germans. They went to Australia. What did they do? They started a beer industry. They went to America. What did they do? They started a beer industry. And so it's a very fun way to look at, if you're just someone who's curious about cultures and what they do as they move around the world, and what is the interaction between a culture and the environment that it enters into, that's and the history that it enters into. Does that cause their culture to change, or do they end up hanging on to it longer? And the funny thing is, it can go either way, because in some cases, being isolated in a new place makes a culture actually hang on to the older things longer than the home country, and so you'll even have words that hang on far longer in this country where German people settled than in the country of origin. So they're all a little bit kind of the same. If you just want a lot of fun interaction, Conquest and Cultures, if you're a little more action-oriented and want to say, how did all the entire history of war between everyone and everyone else go? What were they looking for? What were the results? And what are all the complexities? You just want to understand culture, how they're shaped by these elements. It's super interesting. If I had to pick one, like I said, it really depends on your field of interest. If your field of interest is more military history and things like that, read Conquest and Culture. If you're more sociological and interested in current relations between peoples, maybe read Race and Culture. And if you're just a sort of, I think cultures are neat, and you're a sort of travel-oriented person, someone who just enjoys exploring those things, read Migrations and Cultures. You'll get something out of any one of them. You can even just listen to parts of them. They're fun books. They're interesting, and they're very well researched. And then the final book I want to talk about is A Conflict of Visions. This is Thomas Sowell's favorite book. It's a very different book, though, because some of his books are sociological, some of them are economics, something like the Culture trilogy, lots of data, lots of international perspectives. A Conflict of Visions is very different. It is, I would call it a philosophy book. It is a sort of survey of philosophy, where he's trying to sum up an idea that's behind a whole lot of his thinking. And it's A Conflict of Visions, the ideological origins of political struggles. This is a very ambitious book. This to me is more on the level in some ways of great theories, philosophical theories. It should be, even though it's written by economists, you look at a book like The Wealth of Nations, it's not just a book on technical economics. It's really a book of philosophy. It's articulating a philosophy of how human society and people work. And this book is the same way. It is a theory about how does human society work? How does thought work? What are the fundamental categories that sit behind all these things we deal with every day? Economic theories, political theories, educational theories. What is the unifying principle behind them? and he broadly divides it into two categories. This sort of idealistic vision and this tragic vision, or utopian vision and the trade-off sort of vision. And, shows how different ideologies and different thinkers are at different points along this continuum, because there is a continuum, there's mixing, nothing's the perfect example necessarily, but you can abstract out the general visions. And I think this book is truly brilliant. This book should actually be up there with one. This is perhaps my own personal opinion. There's maybe not a lot of truly great and visionary books of modern philosophy. Now, I say that as someone who was actually a philosophy major, and I understand it's tough because in so many ways you're building on this enormous history, and it's very easy to feel intimidated, even by just someone like Plato or Aristotle, and be like, well, basically all of philosophy is already contained in Plato. Any idea you've had was probably already brought up by just Plato and Aristotle. And that can be very intimidating. And, also as time went on and they got jealous of science, philosophers fell back more on a technical approach to philosophy, which also reduced its appeal to the common man. And I would say this book represents a wonderful middle point between them, because it's the amount of scholarly work that's gone into it and research is almost baffling. It's like a throwback to the great educated works of old, and its scope is so enormous, but it's still readable and it still appeals to the human person. And it actually, instead of just being merely technical, you can think about it in your life right at this moment. You can see how it shapes the very world around you, the person right next to you, the tiny little decisions you make, the way that you think about them. It has wonderful applicability, but it definitely maintains a grand vision. He's pulling together all of modern thought and all of the different political philosophies and economic philosophies, and even in some ways quasi-religious philosophies and ideologies under these large categories as a way to approach and understand them. And I actually think that it's genuinely brilliant. If I had to say, it's one of the few works of true genius of the last few decades, especially philosophically. I'd say it's one of the few works of true genius that really contributed something enduring to the field. I would say in some ways this is a more intellectually intimidating book because it's dealing with high-level things. You need to have a certain amount of vision just to think about this. This is a very ambitious book. On the other hand, and this is true about all Thomas Sowell books, the last 100 pages is just, his... It's just the notes, all of his references. And so it's actually shorter than it looks. It's only 8 chapters, divided into 2 sections, patterns and applications. It's very straightforward, and he just lays it out very easily. I guess in 9 chapters. The role of visions, and then he tells you what the visions are. Visions of knowledge and reason, visions of social processes, varieties and dynamics of visions. And he just goes straight to applications. Well, so he tells you, what are these visions? How do you understand them? And then he just goes straight to, what are the ways we use them? Visions of equality, visions of power, visions of justice, visions, values, and paradigms. So it's actually very straightforward, and you could just pick out of it what you want to read if you don't want to get all that deep into all the applications. If you have a chance, and I think this is another one you can just listen to for free online, just do maybe the first 2 chapters so that you understand the role of visions, which is brilliant work. I would say a lot of it fits in with things that Jung or Jordan Peterson have developed. He articulates in his own particular way, but he's doing it, both of those authors are coming after Jung, for example, but, anticipating a lot of the popularity of this way of looking at it. Thomas Sowell whatever brilliant ideas are going on, Thomas Sowell probably thought of it, 30 years ago. That's what everyone always finds out. And in the same way in philosophy, whatever brilliant thing you've thought of, Plato probably thought of that 2,000 and some hundred years ago. That's just life. That's great. We're rediscovering things. But he has a wonderful way of helping you understand the way in which your vision of the world affects the way that you see the world. And then he talks about two large prevailing visions. And if you want another interesting book to lead into after this book, I would actually consider jumping into Jonathan Haidt. Let's see, I should have that one here. Oh, sorry, I don't have it next to me. But The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, I think that's approaching the similar question in some ways, but from a psychologist perspective. Thomas Sowell got there through economics and philosophy and political theory. There are these big things that are out there in the world, and you can arrive at them by different means. But yeah, if you wanted another book, somewhat similar themes, different perspective, The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, Why Good People Are Divided. That one also approaches the world more through personality research and differences in personality and how they do sort of separate into these different visions. I think combining the two books could provide some very fruitful realms for thought. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks.